the flagship program in this state, right? And
a bullshit, a bullshit, a bullshit, a bullshit.
Hello and good evening, and welcome back to another edition of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. My name is Michael Ween, here on the eve of the 4th of July. Hopefully everyone out there has tomorrow off and is doing well for the Independence Day of the USA. Wednesday, July 3rd, 10:30 p.m. for a late night episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. On tonight's episode, before I introduce my co-hosts and tell you guys to like and subscribe, and of course, please do so. We greatly appreciate it. And check out all of our other content under the live section of our YouTube channel or on our social media feeds, including our Instagram, Twitter, and goodness, I'm blanking. Twitch. Thank you for that. It is late. On tonight's episode, commitment season has arrived, ladies and gentlemen, in recruiting. I wanted to go another direction tonight and potentially talk about Texas's portal class as a part of starting up our Texas football team preview in parts, as we're going to do a little deeper dive into the Longhorns than we do some of these other teams. But news dropped and plans change. Could there be big time recruiting fireworks for the Longhorns that drops tomorrow night? We'll get into that. And we'll also have Emmy moderate a Texas baseball 2024 offseason and entering the SEC Q&A, where he'll ask me some questions and I will answer them. And we'll have a conversation about what's been going on with Jim Schlossnagle, his staff, the transfer portal, and so forth with the Texas baseball program. Should be a good show. If you enjoy it, make sure you like and subscribe. And joining me, a Longhorn fan himself, he's wearing his Texas shirt, one of his Texas shirts. Mr. Emmy Nixon, what's up?
Nothing much, man. Fantastic intro as always. I'm ready to get into this. This is an episode that I was listening to On Texas Football, another really good Texas podcast, if y'all don't know already. And they were already kind of on this type of recruiting wagon, I guess, with the news that's expected to drop tomorrow. So I'm excited to get into this.
Did you see the news that might drop tomorrow? Do you know what it is? If not, I can tell you.
So there are some players making decisions tomorrow, as far as I know.
There are. And we don't really have a Q&A set up for this because plans changed at the last minute. So I'm going to kind of shepherd this conversation. You can jump in and ask questions when you want. You can also we're going to get into a lot of the players that are announcing this weekend, updates on some of the bigger Texas targets. We'll go in a pretty orderly fashion. And after each prospect, I'll give you the opportunity to chip in with your opinions or thoughts or questions. So I was going about my evening earlier, planning to record Dit Hole as we originally planned, with the baseball content and the transfer portal content. Thought we would just push recruiting to Friday or Saturday or this weekend when potentially we have commitments. But then Hayes Fawcett and Decorian Moore dropped a bomb on us. The 5-star wide receiver out of Duncanville High School is going to be making his announcement for where he's going to commit tomorrow night, July 4th at 8 p.m. He's the biggest recruit in this recruiting class for Texas. It was kind of unexpected that he was going to announce this soon. The thought was originally he was going to take a couple of weeks and potentially announce later on July, at the end of the month, or in early August before his season starts. But tonight, Hayes Fawcett drops the news. He drops the edit. He's announcing tomorrow the 4 schools on the edit were Texas, Oregon, Ohio State, and LSU, like we've been talking about
Right.
for the longest time. So I guess with that news, potentially the biggest target in this Texas recruiting class announcing his decision tomorrow, what questions do you have for me?
Well, has there been anything out there that indicates where he's leaning right now?
So there's an elephant in the room right now in recruiting. And the elephant is in the Northwest. And their name is Oregon, the Oregon Ducks. They've been swinging a big stick lately in recruiting, not only with some of the commits that they have received over the past week or so, but the belief across the industry is they are swinging a big NIL stick. And they're potentially willing to go to limits that Texas might not right now be willing to go to on some of these players.
Right.
We're talking in the 7-figure range.
Wow.
And it's not that Texas doesn't swing a big stick in recruiting. They are generally thought of as one of the big dogs. I heard someone that I typically trust on this kind of stuff a couple days ago, I think it was even yesterday, say Texas has anywhere between 20 and 30 guys on this year's team that are going to be making $750,000.
Wow.
So around between $500,000 and $750,000 generally, as a general rule. But the thought is that so far, Texas has not been willing to surpass kind of that $750,000 range
Price tag. Right.
price tag in NIL, because the thought is if they go too much beyond that, that could upset the apple cart with a lot of their other potential, big time players already in the program that aren't making that much money. It's not that they wouldn't go to those limits eventually, but there's been kind of a hesitation behind the scenes. And the thought is that they haven't gone to those limits that Oregon is reportedly going to.
Yeah. And as far as I know, when it comes to Sark's approach with NIL stuff, and you can correct me if I'm off on this, but from what I've heard, it's like he wants players who want to be at Texas first and foremost. And he's not going to lead with the NIL check, right?
Yes.
He really just wants to present the school, present, the city of Austin as the big recruiting card. And then once you get there, the NIL stuff comes after.
And yes, you're absolutely correct. And so circling back around to Oregon, and to be clear, like for Texas fans out there, do not panic for a couple of reasons. Number one, sources very close to the program are reporting that, or have reported behind the scenes, that Texas has allocated around $20 million in NIL to their football program annually. And that's an estimation, but that's generally what they're kind of spending on the NIL front in recruiting in the portal for their football team. That's a lot of money. That's more than 98, 99% of programs out there. There are only a couple other programs that are even in that ballpark. And the thought is that if Oregon's not already there with all the Phil Knight Nike money and the money that they have generated from their football program, the thought is they're swinging a big NIL stick, and it might be bigger right now than Texas for some of these prospects. Because when you look at players that are rated as what I'm calling consensus super blue chips, so players that are rated as high 4 stars or 5 stars by at least 2 of the 4 recruiting services that are out there. We're talking Rivals, we're talking 24/7, we're talking On3, and we're talking ESPN.
Right.
Texas has about double the number of super blue chips that Oregon has right now. And Oregon is using NIL, presumably, and other stuff, of course, as a means to close the gap on the 4 programs that right now have the most elite talent on their rosters. And those programs would be Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, and Texas. And then there's a drop off from there in terms of super blue chips. So, as far as Decorian Moore is concerned, I still think, and I'm still confident that he's going to announce his decision tomorrow, and it will be in favor of the Longhorns. I haven't wavered off that yet. I still believe that. But what I will say is, to my larger point, if there's going to be a school that he would announce for that wouldn't be the Longhorns tomorrow, which I still think would be a surprise, because I just think, he's announcing on the 4th of July. It's going to be around his family. You saw those pictures of his family at Texas on his official visit. It's long been thought he was going to end up a Longhorn. I just feel like it's hard to envision him announcing for any other school other than Texas on the 4th of July when around his family. But if there's going to be one school that he's going to announce for tomorrow that's not Texas, the sense is it's going to be Oregon. Oregon has clearly emerged as Texas's biggest competition in a lot of these big-time recruitments because of one of the reasons being they're swinging a big NIL stick.
To me, it comes down to they got to make up for their location being so far from a lot of these recruits.
That's absolutely part of it. I still think Decorian Moore is going to stay home. He's going to announce for Texas tomorrow. And there have been people on the Texas side that are very, very confident. If he does commit, there's a good likelihood that I will be doing a reaction video very soon afterwards, even if I'm slossed in alcohol. Any other thoughts on Decorian Moore? I think the sense is he's still going to end up being a Longhorn. But I will remind you guys, I did reiterate a couple weeks ago after Decorian Moore's official visit to Texas, we talked about his recruitment, and I said the vibes coming out of that official visit were Texas knocked it out of the park. And it would be an upset of all upsets if he doesn't announce eventually that he's going to commit to Texas.
Yep.
But then the Oregon visit happened, and we've seen all the momentum that Oregon is generating on the recruiting trail right now. And it's not quite, I think, the slam dunk that people maybe thought it was after that official visit, but people still believe like he's going to end up a Longhorn. So that's the DeCorian Moore news. He's announcing his commitment tomorrow at 8 p.m. It's big news, huge. The biggest so far of this recruiting cycle, in my opinion, across the country. Because I think he's generally thought of by most people as a top 5 prospect nationally, in the top at his position.
Yeah, and this is like my first year following recruiting this closely, and DeCorian Moore is definitely going to be one of those guys where I'm definitely going to follow his career very closely. So that's definitely going to be the cool part of this for me. Like this will be the first time I've followed some of these athletes college track like all the way through.
Yeah.
It would help if he's at Texas too, though.
So where do we go next? As far as the other receivers go, just real fast, Khalil Lockett is going to announce on August 7th. And then Jamie French, we still got a while to go on that one. As of right now, he's scheduled to announce August 30th, right before his season begins. So what I'm hearing on that front is there's still a strong sense and strong confidence that the Longhorns will land at least 2 of the big 3 wide receiver targets. The smart money is still on, I think, DeCorian Moore and Jamie French. But Khalil Lockett's kind of a wild card in all this. And so that's where we stand on the receivers. I generally don't panic on wide receiver recruiting whatsoever. But it would sure be nice to jumpstart this July momentum with a commitment from one of the nation's best prospects tomorrow night in DeCorian Moore. So, with that being said, who else is on the horizon for potentially announcing their commitments to Texas or elsewhere? Let's talk about Riley Pettijohn, the borderline 5-star linebacker out of McKinney, Texas. Texas's biggest target at the linebacker position. So last week, Rivals had its 5-star camp in Jacksonville, Florida. And a lot of elite prospects for both the 25 class and the 26 class were at this camp over the course of a couple days. And it, again, gives these evaluators a chance to evaluate these prospects. Once again, get their eyes on these prospects again so that when the next time these recruiting rankings update, they can take everything into consideration. So Riley Pettijohn was at this camp, and I think the general sense has been that he was eventually going to end up at Texas. Well, these are 17 and 18-year-old kids that we're talking about here, and things can change on a dime. So the word now across the industry, different from what was being reported 2 or 3 weeks ago, is that USC and Ohio State, as of earlier this week or last week, were his top 2 schools. And Texas was a close third. What does that mean? Well, you can take that a couple different ways. Is he, number one, drumming up some suspense so that people don't automatically assume that he's going to Texas like it's been long thought he was going to? Or coming out of his official visits to Ohio State and USC, has something actually changed on that front? And has Texas lost its grip on this recruitment, if they ever really had one in the first place? I tend to think that, and again, he's going to announce on Saturday. I believe it's July 6th on Saturday. I don't know the specific time, but he's scheduled to announce his commitment on Saturday. As of right now, I get the sense that that announcement, unfortunately for Texas fans, is going to go in another direction at this moment in time. I would lean Ohio State, but USC has some confidence. I think those 2 schools are really neck and neck right now. Now, in the next 48 to 72 hours, things can change on a dime. And sources earlier today on the Texas side were still reporting that they felt they were in a good position for Riley Pettijohn. So, what I would tell everyone on that recruitment is, if he announces for Ohio State or USC on Saturday, don't panic. This staff, although they would absolutely take commitments right now from all of these elite prospects that we're talking about, they like to play the longer game. And one of the best sources out there has said that a lot of these recruitments are really going to come down to November and December when we're near signing day. And I think there's still confidence on the Texas side that even if they don't get his commitment on Saturday, they can work on him,
Still flip him,
and kind of do what they did with Anthony Hill,
right?
2 years ago. So,
my stance on linebacker, to me, it kind of feels like a position where you can go into the transfer portal and get those type of guys, especially for kind of that play caller role, that Mike linebacker, just because you would like to have some experience in that spot. But I mean, we also got Bo Barnes coming in, Anthony Hill, of course, still there. I think we're in a good spot. I like David Bender as well. But that's just my take. I think linebacker is one of those spots. Maybe that could be an episode. Maybe just like rank which positions you would prefer to recruit rather than transfer portal, and vice versa. Maybe that's like something we could do in the future. But linebacker is one of those where I think I lean more transfer portal personally.
Okay, so there's a lot of good news, I think, coming tomorrow with DeCorian Moore, hopefully.
Yeah.
And maybe not so great news on Saturday, given that I think Pettijohn is going to commit elsewhere, but don't panic. There's still a long road to go in this recruiting cycle. I think his recruitment will ultimately come down to October, November, and December. A couple
What have
more.
you been hearing on what have you been hearing on Michael Fasusi, by the way?
Well, that's where I'm going next.
Oh, gosh. Okay, my bad.
There was an update this morning from someone that's pretty reliable. That is kind of an unexpected update. That Lamont Rogers, who's another elite super blue chip kind of offensive lineman from Mesquite Horn here in Texas, who's presumably also going to announce his commitment on Saturday. There's growing confidence in Austin on the Longhorns' chances of landing Lamont Rogers. And by the way, he is also projected to play tackle at the next level. He's, in my opinion, an elite prospect. He's a super blue chip guy. Right now, by rivals, he's not rated as a 5-star. I haven't dug on what he's rated by other services, but he's one of the elite offensive line prospects in the state of Texas. It was thought that he was an Oklahoma lean, big time, and that Fasusi was generally leaning towards Texas. Although that is still a Texas-Oklahoma battle. And to answer your question, I think that recruitment is going to take a little bit longer to kind of work itself out. I don't expect anything on Michael Fasusi until August. Maybe right before his high school season begins is I think when we're going to hear something. Mid-August on Michael Fasusi is what I would tell you. And it's Texas or Oklahoma. And the general sense there is the pendulum is kind of swinging back and forth. He recently had one of his best friends commit to Oklahoma. Oklahoma has built a really good relationship there. I think there's might be a sense that he would have an easier path to playing time potentially early at Oklahoma than he would at Texas, given that Texas's depth chart on the offensive line is generally
Elite.
thought to be stronger than Oklahoma's at this point. But a lot of sources behind the scenes still feel confident that when it's all said and done, he will be signing on the dotted line for the Longhorns. What's interesting about this Lamont Rogers news is all of a sudden, after all of this Oklahoma buzz, pro-Oklahoma buzz for Lamont Rogers, he's not really in the picture for the Longhorns. Multiple high-level sources in Austin associated with offensive line recruiting feel the Longhorns have a really good shot at the product from Mesquite Horn High School. And sources are saying that after all this Oklahoma buzz, not only does Texas have a good shot, but their biggest competition is now Missouri for Lamont Rogers. And so I don't know what to really think of that. I think we're sitting in a place right now with offensive line recruiting where I really like the individual players that Texas has committed right now. I like the Coleman brothers. I like Jackson Christian, who I think is going to slide into guard eventually at the college level. Could swing back out to tackle, but I think he'll start at guard. And
Can you remind me where he's from again? I can't quite remember.
He's from
Port, right?
He's from Port Neches Groves here in Texas.
Okay.
And then they also have John Mills, who committed a week or two ago from the state of California in the San Francisco area, who I think right now is their best offensive line commit in the class. I think he's very underrated by the recruiting services that are out there. But I think when it's all said and done, he'll be a 4-star prospect. But if it's just those guys in the offensive line class for Texas and no Michael Fasusi, no Lamont Rogers, it's going to be an underwhelming class for Texas on the offensive line because although those players are good prospects, Texas still wants the elite of the elite. And those guys aren't thought of to be the elite of the elite. The standard right now at Texas is to recruit the elite of the elite prospects, super blue chip kind of guys. And that they, to really make this offensive line class a success, need Michael Fasusi or maybe one of these other big time offensive line prospects in the state of Texas. Now we could be in a position where Texas ends up with those four guys, Jordan and Devin Coleman, Jackson Christian, and John Mills, along with Lamont Rogers and Michael Fasusi. Now we're talking an offensive line class that I think could be compared to the 2022 offensive line class. Because you would have the two blue chippers and Michael Fasusi and Lamont Rogers, just like you had with Kelvin Banks and Devin
Coleman, right?
No, Campbell. And then you would have a bunch of guys who could develop into really good players, right? I don't know. We'll see. I think, according to sources, it's Texas or Missouri for Lamont Rogers, which is kind of unexpected. Yeah. A lot of Texas fans' minds immediately go to, well, if Texas is pushing for Lamont Rogers, does that mean that they're kind of not looking so hot on the Michael Fasusi front? Maybe, but
not necessarily. I mean, we are going after those three different wide receivers at the same time, so it's not
maybe right now, but that recruitment is not being won right now. That recruitment's going to be won later on, the Michael Fasusi one. So,
before we move on, what have you been hearing in terms of the defensive line? Because I was looking at our depth chart the other day, and we could potentially be losing 5 guys on that D line if we have some breakouts come next year. Ethan Burke, guys like that, could end up leaving for the NFL. I've heard that there's been some battles with LSU on that front.
I don't know that we have time to really.
Okay, sorry to put you on the spot, man.
Get into defensive line.
Next episode.
Defensive line has been an issue. I'll just quickly synopsisize it. Is that even a word? Summarize it.
It is now.
Summarize it for you in about 30 seconds to a minute if I can. Texas currently has 4-star defensive lineman Brandon Brown out of Ugali, Florida, committed to them right now. He committed back in December before he even took an official visit to Texas, back when Bo Davis was still the defensive line coach. Over the course of the past couple months, though, he's thought to be a soft commit, meaning he's taken a bunch of official visits to other schools, including USC and LSU. And the thought is Texas is probably going to lose him eventually. I think he has another announcement set for Friday. I think LSU is the trendy pick to flip Brandon Brown. Good player, but not someone that you should get yourself in a tizzy over losing by any stretch of the imagination. He's not, say, losing
Ja'Cory Moore.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the bigger picture on that is if Brandon Brown decommits, Texas has no defensive line prospects committed in this class. And a lot of their other targets, for example, Zion Williams out of Lufkin, is announcing tomorrow. And the thought is he's going to announce for LSU. And just this past weekend, Josiah Sharma, a 4-star defensive lineman from California, announced for Oregon. And Myron Charles, another super blue chip defensive lineman, announced for Florida State. And so if Brandon Brown decommits, that leaves Texas in a very bare position from a defensive line recruiting standpoint. I think the sense is they're going to get DJ Sanders, who's a good prospect. He's not the elite of the elite. They're going to get him, though, eventually, I think. But if they don't get him, that's the one kind of, and I'm not panicking because I've been following recruiting for a long time now. And generally, I think the Texas staff knows what it's doing. They're going to make their big pushes on a lot of these guys later on in the fall. And they're not going to give up if these guys commit elsewhere. But if there's one position that I would tell you to be concerned about in recruiting, and I think this has been the case for a while, but it's just kind of the level of concern and for some panic has gone up the past couple of days because of a lot of these Texas targets committing elsewhere and the need for a defensive line, especially on the interior for Texas. I think the sense is if this class underwhelms on the defensive line, they'll do something similar to what they did this year, and they'll go sign 3 or 4 more defensive linemen in the portal next year.
Yeah. Okay.
We'll get in more of that discussion maybe on our next episode or an episode here in the next week or two. But we need to move on to this baseball stuff. So, oh goodness. Where do you want to start? Well, let me start with this. So, Michael Early, the hitting coach, got the job at A&M. So, what does that mean for the coaching staff? Well, they have Jim Schlossnagle as the head coach, of course. Nolan Kane as the
pitching coach, right?
Recruiting coordinator and assistant head coach.
Yeah.
Max Weiner, the pitching coach. They did keep those 2 guys. So who's the hitting coach now? Well, Texas announced that Troy Tulowitzki is going to be the hitting coach. Who's Troy Tulowitzki? Well, he played Major League Baseball as a really good, I think he was a shortstop, for about a decade. I gotta look up his career accolades because I don't want to get them wrong for you guys. But he's been with Texas for a couple years in kind of like an off the field advisory role, if I'm not mistaken. But he is a let me see.
Is he an alum?
No, I don't think he's not an alum of he's not an alum of Texas. So he was drafted by the Colorado Rockies in the first round in 2005 out of Long Beach, California. So he had a pretty long and successful career. He played for the Colorado Rockies for most of his career, and then for Toronto towards the latter of his career. I think he's a 4-time Silver Slugger, and it looks like he was a 5-time All-Star. So I'm excited. He's familiar with his program.
That's a big time hire.
And he's going to be, I believe, a really good hitting coach. And just that core right there is an A-plus staff. That is a level of staff that Texas did not have under David Pierce. Not even close. So the general sense is, and we can get into each guy maybe a little deeper on another episode, just because we don't have as much time as I thought we would. But
my bad.
Be really not a problem. The recruiting stuff takes precedent, especially when
don't let me talk football. I can go on for hours.
Is announced tomorrow. But be really excited about the coaching staff. That's what I would tell everybody. And then there were a couple off the field roles also filled for Texas baseball, but we won't get into those tonight, unfortunately. The big stuff that you guys want to know about. Over the past couple days, there's been a lot of roster movement. Lots of players have reaffirmed their returns to Texas after speculation that some might enter the portal. Many big time contributors to this Texas baseball team have announced their returns. Max Bellew, the Big 12 Player of the Year, announced he's returning next year, which is big. He'll be part of the Texas outfield. Both catchers, Kimball Schuessler and Ryan Galvan, announced their returns to the Texas program. The thought is Galvan, who really emerged this year, is going to be the catcher, and Schuessler might move to first base. We will see on that. Will Gasparino, after there was some speculation behind the scenes that LSU came hard after him, tried to get him to go into the portal. He's staying at Texas. That's big. He's going to play center field next year for Texas.
Huge.
Yeah,
unrelated, but doesn't that seem like a great name for a pitcher, though? Like, he has gas in his name.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You're not wrong on that. And then there have been other guys who have also reaffirmed their return to Texas. Max Scrubs, who was in the weekend rotation, is coming back. Ace Whitehead, who pitched well for Texas down the stretch.
That's the two-way guy, right?
He's coming back.
If I remember right.
The other part of this is the MLB draft begins July 14th. And Texas has they actually have a couple draft eligible guys that if they could get one or two of them back, it would be huge. The bigger ones are Jared Thomas and Jalen Flores, the shortstop. What am I hearing on that front? Well, it's going to be really difficult to get both of them back to campus. I think there's a good shot they could get one of them back to campus. And if I were to tell Texas fans which one to be more hopeful comes back to campus, I would tell you Jalen Flores, the shortstop, who really had a good season this year, was just named, I believe, a third team All-American by D1 Baseball. Not that Jared Thomas didn't also have an excellent year, and that I wouldn't want him back as well. I absolutely would. Because if you had Jared Thomas and Jalen Forrest back to this lineup with Max Bellew coming back, there's stuff to really get excited about for Texas baseball. But Flores, I just think with Thomas being kind of going back and forth between the outfield and first base, and Flores being the shortstop, I don't know. I'd want the shortstop back because the biggest part of this roster that's in flux right now is the infield. No third baseman right now. No second baseman right now. That's D. Kennedy, a freshman for Texas last year, has gone into the portal and since committed to Kansas State. There are some openings on the infield right now that it's thought, a lot of those holes are thought to be soon filled through the transfer portal with what Texas is already doing in the portal. But it would be big to get one of Jared Thomas and or Jalen Flores back. I think they have a better shot getting Flores back because from all the projections that I'm seeing, Thomas is projected as like a borderline first round, second round kind of guy. I don't think he's coming back.
Yeah, he's in high demand for sure.
Another big one that they could get back, but I'm not sure there's a ton of confidence, is LBJ, LeBron Johnson Jr., who is draft eligible. Didn't have the season that he wanted to have, but I think there's still a good chance that he remains in the draft because people are going to bet on his talent and his stuff. That's really where it stands right now. Texas is in a pretty good position, and they're doing some good work so far in the transfer portal. I don't know if I want to get into. Here's my question to you. I think there's a sense that Texas could pick up a couple more transfer portal commits over the next 3 or 4 days. So my question to you would be, do you want to talk about the commitments they already have now, or do you want to maybe wrap up this episode with something else like prospect of the week, which we haven't done in a long time, or something else Texas football related? Just real quickly.
Yeah, we can. I was thinking maybe we wrap up with something else. That's probably.
Okay.
But looking at this outline, there is. I think this question number 5 you have here could be a pretty interesting conversation. So I'll just read it for you right here. What's one big thing Texas fans specifically need to know about SEC baseball? Give us quick synopsis for each of these top SEC baseball programs. So we'll just cover like 2 of them, I think, and then call it a night. You think?
Yeah, let me pull up my notes real fast, and then we can get into this. But I think while I pull up my notes that I had for this question, the big thing Longhorn fans and OU fans, for that matter, need to know about SEC baseball is it's hard to sustain winning at a high level in this conference. That's really the bottom line. I could go on and on with examples, but don't expect to be, at the top of the conference year in and year out. It's just there are so many elite programs in this conference matter. And we've seen a lot of examples the past couple of years. Even the biggest thing I can tell you is that the past 6 national champions in college baseball have all come from the SEC, and they've all been different teams. So
Wow, that's crazy.
it's not like there's one dominant force that's winning
Right.
every single year. It's really hard.
Yeah. How
What I
good
would
is OU's baseball program? I'm
They're
not
good.
really oh, pretty
They're good.
solid.
They're pretty solid. They won the Big 12 this past year. Um, I don't know if they're thought of like in the same light as like Texas, LSU, the Blue Bloods, but they're a solid program. Um, okay, let's get into like a quick minute on each of these schools. So let's start with Tennessee. Tennessee, they won the SEC regular season title in a tie with Kentucky. They also won the Knoxville Regional, the Super Regional, and they won the College World Series in a decisive final Game 3 over Texas A&M. Tony Vitello is generally thought of as the coach in college baseball right now. They're a heck of a program. Okay, Texas A&M. At times this past year, they looked like, to me, the best team in the country. There was kind of a late season swoon that took them from the number 1 team in America to the number 3 team in America. And now Jim Schlossnagle has left for another job. Michael Early is in as the new head coach. And he has already been able to retain a lot of the roster that was already projected to be a top 3, top 5 roster going into next season. They retained Jace Laviolette, who's going to be, I think, the number 1 pick in next year's draft. Gavin Verhoevic, their physical stud at third base. Caden Sorrell, Caden Kent. All those guys in that lineup from this past year are coming back. And so they're going to be really good next year. They're going to enter as one of the best teams in the country. Who else did I have on that list? What other programs did I have?
Texas A&M.
I just addressed them.
Right. Oh, Arkansas. Sorry.
Arkansas. They've been really strong in the regular season, and over the past couple of years, they've generally faltered in home regional play. It's a proud program. It's got a massive fan base. Those fans show up to support Arkansas baseball. They're not going to be very welcoming of Texas when Texas eventually goes to Fayetteville to play them. That rivalry is going to be renewed very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
If people didn't know the hate that Arkansas fans have for Texas, it might even run deeper than the hate that OU fans and some Texas A&M fans have for Texas. But this past year, they had elite pitching, but their offense just wasn't strong and consistent enough. What will 2025 be like? Well, Dave Van Horn's a really good coach. They're going to attack the portal really hard, and they should be one of the top teams in the SEC moving forward. The last one I really wanted to address was Florida. Florida struggled at times last year, especially in their midweek games against lesser programs that they should have beaten. But they found their groove late, and they made a postseason run that lasted all the way until the College World Series semifinals, where they were beat by Texas A&M. Their best player, Jack Caglione, who's a pitcher and hitter, is going to the draft. He's going to be a top 10 pick. But they do have a strong group of returnees that are going to make the Gators one of the popular picks for Omaha in 2025. They've got a couple of really talented freshman pitchers, Liam Peterson, Luke McNeely, Jack Clemente, that will pave the way for what should be another strong Florida team next year. And they're already really attacking the portal. So Florida's a really strong program. And then LSU, they're going to look a lot different than they have the past couple of years in 2025. They kind of took a step back this year after winning the championship in 2023. They're going to lose Tommy White. They're going to lose, presumably, Luke Holman and Gage Jump. Almost certainly all going to be drafted and stick in the draft. But they could also be, with some of their returning talent, a top 5 squad next year. And that's kind of the Cliff Notes version to get familiar with some of the top programs in the SEC. But that's not even talking about Ole Miss, who won the College World Series 3 years ago.
Or that's Kentucky, who was in Omaha this year as well.
Or Kentucky, or Georgia, who had a great 2024 in their first year under their new head coach, Wes Johnson. They had the player of the year in Charlie Condon, who's going to be a pro. He might be the number 1 pick. So how will they handle year 2? We'll have to see. But they've been uber active in the transfer portal. You can just see, like, the SEC is a monster in baseball, maybe even more so than it is in football. And so I hope that's a lot of information coming at you at once with the recruiting and the baseball stuff. But hopefully I did a pretty good job of saying it, getting the message across the best that I could as I was kind of scrambling to prepare for this episode. So, any parting shots before we get out of here?
DeQuarion Moore is a Longhorn. Putting it out there. Saying it now.
Fingers crossed.
Speaking it into existence like LeVar Ball. It's done. Undefeated. Never lost.
Yeah, I'll reiterate before we get out of here. I'm still confident on that front. My confidence hasn't wavered. I think he's going to be a Longhorn tomorrow at 8 p.m. Central Time. Be on the lookout. If you're not on the lookout, perhaps you're maybe at a 4th of July party or you're slossed in alcohol and you maybe forgot that he's announcing at 8 p.m. I will remind you guys, if he commits to Texas, you will hear about it, whether you're sober or not sober. And it could be reason to, I think it's going to be reason to drink more either way it goes.
Exactly.
If he commits to Texas, it'll be a celebration. If he doesn't, might want to just keep having drinks and forget about it.
There's a reason they call July 5th National Hangover Day. So
yeah. But for that reason, since that we've now hit the hour mark and that tomorrow is July 4th, hopefully you all have a fantastic 4th of July holiday. Stay safe. Don't do anything stupid. Enjoy the baseball, I guess. I don't know really what else is on right now in the sports world. And be on the lookout for more content coming. Football previews are starting up real soon. So I actually, and I don't mean to drag this on longer, but I actually watched the first episode of Hard Knocks with the New York Giants, the Offseason version, which was, I got to say, pretty interesting yesterday. Talked a lot about good insight into how the Saquon Barkley decision went down. Interesting stuff. So I guess that's about it. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully, Decoria Moore commits to Texas. And we will see you this weekend for another episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. So, with all that being said, enjoy the holiday, and we're out. Hook 'em.
Hook 'em. Remember, Uncle Sam is watching. Don't do